Welcome back to the broadcast, and this is Daybreak, in case you're just joining us. Today, we're just one day to the celebrations of Madaraka Day, 60 years since the country attained internal self-rule. We are just assessing the state of the nation and issues that we ought to be improving on moving forward, and the gains that we have as a country, if there is any. Of course, that is what my panelists are helping us to unpack this particular morning. We are having this morning with us Mheshimiwa Njeru Gathangu. He is the former Member of Parliament, Runyenje's constituency. We also have Dr. Kenneth Ombogi, Senior Lecturer at the Department of History at the University of Nairobi, and also Dr. Martin Olo, a political analyst and also a lecturer of law at Daystar University. Thank you, gentlemen, for creating time once again. And just before we went on break, there was that conversation revolving around how our history sort of like is connected from how this whole journey began. And I know you have something.
Yes, I had not finished.
But then we go to Dr.
Yes, I had not finished, but I wanted to say this. For them to be able to stamp the deprivation, then what they did was this, that Kenya was proclaimed free, right? But then Kenya was not secure. And what is the security about here? We have got about 3 branches of security in any society. 3. One is the food security. The next one is the medical and health services. The next one is security against aggression. Now, when you look at the 3, from face value, you think we are doing very well. But if you go into them, you will see 3 things happening. One is that we were supposed to fight diseases. You cannot fight diseases unless you have got a nutrition program. That nutrition program requires food production. And that food production is non-existent in Kenya. At least not in 1962, 63. Whatever was being produced was sisal, pyrethrum, tea, coffee, cotton, tobacco, etc., etc., etc. There was nothing like food. Next is that when you come to those health services, therefore, and you have no food, then you are going to see that you need supplements, food supplements in health services, clinics, and etc., etc., etc. They weren't there. And therefore, that bit of security, non-existent. Food, health services. The next one is about aggression. Some people think that aggression is Al-Shabaab attacking Kenya, Somalia attacking, Ethiopia attacking, Uganda attacking. No, that is not the aggression.
What is it?
Aggression is this, that you have got a country somewhere planning and executing programs to make sure that Kenyans continue to be retarded. One of them is drugs. Introduce drugs in society. Introduce illicit and killer brews in that society. Make sure that they are obstructed. Give them freedom to smoke, bangi, etc., etc. What is more destructive than that? So that the growing generations are totally destroyed, and therefore thinking out, idea creation out, creativity, nothing. Pioneering, you can't get. Why? Pharaoh's own trenches. Then the next thing you think about is this, that you have got a whole government, and that government has got really nothing else to look for. They are looking for land, they're looking for houses, they're looking for money. So they use all our sweat to enrich themselves.
Okay. No, Paul, yes, Dr. You had a point.
Thank you very much. I like what Honorable Gathangu is saying, but I just wanted to refer to what Dr. Martin Olo alluded to earlier. I like his idea that our leaders are a microcosm of what the Kenyan society is. That is very interesting to me, because it is actually tantamount to blaming the victims, the wretched of the earth, as it were, if I may use the words of Frantz Fanon. The responsibility of where our situation is currently, the state of the nation, over these 60 years, lies with our leaders. You cannot place this on the hands of the victims. Some of them who have died from diseases that they shouldn't die. Some of them who have died of hunger 60 years later. Some of them who have actually no place to call home because land has been grabbed. Ask yourself, who owns land in this country? Our political elites. Anybody who owns probably more than it is necessary, you always know that they have had a link with the different administrations that we have had in the country, from Kenyatta 1 to Moi, to Kibaki, to Kenyatta 2. And we are going to see what happens, because all these are children of the different administrations that we have had in the past. That's number one. And you see, to illustrate that, in Singapore, the example I gave of Lee Kuan Yew, that great soul who created what they call an Asian tiger, had the same challenges that we have here. Of course, we have a slightly different history, but when he started, he faced the opposition that you could expect. There were people who even said, we want to go back to the Malaysian Federation. We don't know where this guy is taking us. He stood his ground. I always say we share an alma mater. He was a graduate of the University of Cambridge, just like me. And he stood firm and put his country in a stead that is not very easy to steer clear. Mahathir Mohamad in Malaysia, the example is very, very clear. Leadership. When he left and his country started being shaky, at some point I think he came back.
At 94 years.
At 94 years.
Yes.
And now you look at Malaysia, it's back on track generally. They have their own complex issues that they are dealing with. But where are we? Look at us. The last point I wanted to make is the portrait that I created out of the question you asked me, what is there for Ruto? I was talking about the ideal and saying our president has a chance, whether he will lose it or not, to unite the country. He has a chance to put a country back into a level of optimism. Kenyans are now overly pessimistic. In fact, some of them are near suicidal, if you looked at it. So I said, tomorrow, the president has a chance to reverse that. Whether he will do it or not, we can only wait and see. If he goes the direction Dr. Olo was talking about, well, that's a trend that we have seen of him. Okay. But I will give him the benefit of the doubt and say, let's wait and see. And finally, very interesting what Honorable Njeru is saying about Mzee Kenyatta. Mzee Kenyatta, a product of a very interesting duality in every stage of his political life. At some point, he found himself between the colonialists and Africans. At another point, he finds himself between the radicals during the height of Mau Mau and the moderates. And in post-colonial Kenya, he finds himself between the capitalists and the socialists. Kenyatta was a shrewd politician. He always took a position that served his interests.
And that's fine. What I would like to what I would like to disagree with him is that he's putting too much faith in leadership, because leaders lead people, and those people are either coming along with them, or those people have expectations or not. Now, what he said, and he's the historian here, when you go back to the Mau Mau movement and we go back to the history of the struggle of independence in Kenya, it was not because of Jomo Kenyatta. It is the people. And you can look at the people's own efforts in rebellion, in Central, in other parts of the country. So that it is not correct to say that it's about leaders. Yes, leaders are important, but it's equally important to have a people who know who want to go somewhere. And this is where, even from his own history, people like Thomas Hobbes will talk about the social contracts. Social contracts not leaders, it's the people deciding for what they want. In other words, people decide what kind of a leader they want. So when you go to Rwanda, for example, you see Kagame surviving, it's because his leadership and the people resonate. And equally here, we don't have leaders coming from the blues. President Ruto had a narrative. He convinced people. He's in leadership. So there are people who believe in him. And therefore, as a leader, he also needs to make sure that he has supporters. Even dictators require supporters. So what you're looking at is, at some point, you must have numbers with you, people with you, in order for you to carry yourself along. All those leaders that we're talking about, Singapore and Malaysia, and I like when Kenyans compare ourselves with Singapore and Malaysia. The difference is not just leaders, it's the people. Because and he's right to say that whenever you go anywhere, you find that as a people, as workers and as, intellectuals, we contribute immensely to other countries. When you go to Rwanda, the service industry was run by Kenyans. When you go to Rwanda, the whole land sector was...
Because of the human resource that we export.
That we export. And that when Kenyans go out there, they are very productive. But what happens when they're here? What opportunities are we seeing them getting hold of? And therefore, and it goes back to what kind of leadership we have.
All boils down to leadership.
But it's also what we do. He was talking earlier about how, in the past, University of Nairobi was not just a university. It was the seat of opposition. And it was not leadership. It was about people, young people who had a belief. That's where people like him, people like James Orengo and others who are brewed. They were brewed from a certain thinking. So yes, there's room for leaders, but not all. Okay. We also
Dr.
need
Olo,
people.
but what is wrong with the people then that is stopping them from breaking off from this watertight history that seems to have, taken a toll on them? Why can't they just
I've told you,
like you're describing? What is stopping
I've told you there's apathy.
Yeah.
And when you look at that apathy, you'll see it in Kenya and you saw it recently in Nigeria. What percentage of Kenyans have been voting for presidency in this country?
Okay, let's say to get the numbers correct.
Yes.
8 million Kenyans did not vote.
Did not vote.
That is a silent majority. For Nigeria's case, more than 70 million
did not vote.
Nigerians never voted.
There are consequences for that apathy. You get a leader you like or you don't like, because whatever you do, there will be a leader. Two, when you have people ready and willing to take bribes and to compromise, then a leader with money will make it. Ask Mutumishi here. Today, if he stands, because the politics he played before, him and the likes of Martin Shikuku, today you can't, because they believe they had something they were selling to people. Koigi Wamwere and others, they were selling something to people. People believed in them and put them in leadership. Today, if you don't have the shilling, don't try.
Let me just respond to that. We are not here to have a dialogue between me and Dr. Lo.
But Dr. What I wanted to say before you answer that is that, well, it's a very good debate because it is supposed to be opening up some ideas with the people out there. And I think it is good that they also look at your position and his position, so that we do not answer each other like we are sorting out their problem.
Yes.
What I wanted to say, and I think I'm looking at both of you and your argument, is this: that this nation has been denied, and therefore you are going to have two sectors here. You are going to have the leadership that knows exactly what they want in this government or in this society. Then we have got a people that are ignorant of their intentions, meaning that we are going to be working parallel to each other. And people will be discovering by and by that kumbe, it was the wrong group that we chose, right? I want to bring this idea here, that you have got a country that has registered about 40,000 Christian sects. 40,000 Christian sects. That translates to about 900 Christian sects every county, right? What do they talk about Jesus? Because if they are going to be relevant, then majority of them are going to be liars. And those liars are taken by the people to be God's representatives, so that whatever they say is believed. At the same time, you have got about 120,000 NGOs and CPOs. What does that translate to? Every CBO and every NGO is preaching something, and they are preaching to the same groups of people. The confusion and the conflict that is created within the mind of the people is huge. And then the next thing is, the example is there. You cannot tell me that the people that Shakahola has witnessed today were so informed about Jesus, they wanted to see him in death as they suffered hunger. You know, and when you look at it, you actually see the ignorance that is tearing in this society.
Okay.
And so what I'm trying to say is this, that we have got these two groups. The leaders is one group. The people is another group. But the people are totally ignorant of what the leader intends to do with their will and their power.
Okay.
Let
Martin,
yes.
This is the point, because we have talked about, and Safin did inquire about that, the leadership question and the lacking vision that you and Daktari had agreed on, which is the common denominator, and so did Njeru here, who was a lawmaker who was in the front lines during the fight for multi-party democracy, and we'll talk about that on the Constitution 2010 by extension. Then now the shift goes to the people who give the mandate, and leaders are a reflection of the society. We, the Kenyan people, the sovereignty lies with them. But then you get instances where, yes, we are a democracy, but the choices that the Kenyan people make, for example, in Parliament, there was a warning by the former Interior Minister, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, about people who are involved in money laundering, people who had questionable integrity, people who had corruption cases. Yet again, the mandate was given to them. I mean, when will that paradigm shift occur amongst the Kenyan people, and that mind shift to give clean Kenyans the mandate to govern over them? Because if it's about leadership, then why not award the Kenyan people who are well, who have no questionable integrity, who can substantiate their source of wealth and are clean in terms of their record, the mandate to leaders?
I wish, this is a very good debate we are having, because you remember at some point when somebody said that a leader had stolen, and that leader wanted to seek a position. People said, look, if that fellow is a thief, she's our thief. And there is a place where in this country we must appreciate where we are. And that's why I was saying that the role of money, the role of hoodwinking, and the role of hypnotizing, and it's not just confined to Christianity, and that's what I want to debunk. It's not about how many sects we have registered. There is no difference between Shakahola and the Yala River massacres and the murders and people were being thrown. Both of them are the same. There is an acquiescence, there is silence around it. When the state is killing people, there's silence. When the church is, or some section of the church is misleading people, there is silence. Or indeed, when there is even, say very right-wing or, doctrines in some religion that is not good, we are silent about it. We begin to, instead of questioning the crime, we begin to say it is a religious issue. So basically, as a country, we are in denial, and we are also in some silence, some form of silence. There's no difference with the Yala massacre. Of course, when this government came, they hyped that issue, and that issue just went like that. The question that one should ask is, how would 200 plus people die, be buried, and nobody knows in a country where Nyumba Kumi is, where there are chiefs, assistant chiefs up to the village level, where the NIS and everybody is available. So this is acquiescence, or this silence is very, very telling. Not just for the churches, not just for the security organs, but rather there is a place where we have arrived. And you ask it. I mean, I have come to accept that people get leaders they want because those leaders resonate with them. So if I come with goodies, I give you and you give me a seat, it means what I stand for you like. If I come with money, I give you the money, and you don't question the source of my money, it means you don't care about it. So I can go wherever I can steal, but when I come back home, I'm a hero. Now, that is a national problem that we are having. It's the same problem that is funding banditry and cattle rustling, because as long as you are going to steal other people's cattle and you bring them here, there's a trophy. So there's no issue around it. Yeah. These are issues that we have in our national psyche. And once we have them, we begin to construct ourselves from there. Because as we sit here today, you know for sure that a number of people who had cases, or a number of people who you'd have thought did not run, a number of people who were being accused of murder, not only made it through elections, but also made it through appointments. Yeah. And at some point, even their charges were dropped. Now, you can have all sorts of questions around it, but that is our reality, and we must face it.
An unfortunate reality.
Here is where we are.
So. Dr. Mbogi, as you add your thoughts on what they've said, before we point an accusing finger to the people, have we empowered them to make these choices? Have we given them an option to even say no, or even decide on what threshold makes a good leader? Are we really being fair?
For me, Safin, that is where leadership comes in.
So we go back to leadership.
And Dr. Low and I are actually talking about the same thing, perhaps using different languages, probably in view of our different disciplines. Because the interconnectedness between the people and their leaders is something fairly obvious. And I'm a believer that things that happen at the top, they have a fundamental bottom, in terms of leaders. If I was in my history class, that's what we could call the subaltern thinking in history from below. That the small people, the social groups are the ones that contribute and cumulatively produce the leaders. And I agree with that. But what I'm saying this morning is that the fundamental responsibility of the transformation of society actually lies with leaders. And the history is replete with examples. It took the efforts of one man to create Nazi Germany that will turn out to be a killing machine in Europe until it was stopped. India was a British colony for over 200 years. Until the legendary Mahatma Gandhi comes to the scene and says, wait a minute, we can get rid of this. Even across the Atlantic, in America, finds itself in a Great Depression. It took the vision and imagination of one man to say we can get out of this. The only thing as Americans you need to fear is fear itself. And he came up with what he called the new deal and reconstructed America. When the African Americans were almost giving up to oppression, alienation, control and domination, it took the wisdom of one man to say, no way, we cannot give up. I have a dream that one day there will be a place in America for the Africans. So,
how do we make that ours?
That's why I'm saying that it is the effort of the leadership that we have had that has made sure that our people remain ignorant, that levels of awareness remain low. Mashini was just talked about Shakahola, and Dr. Low referred to it. The security agencies in this country are actually fundamentally not about you and me, the common, ordinary countryman and woman. The security of the country, just as we inherited it from colonialism, is interested in protecting the state. Those people who are fasting in a forest were not a direct threat to the state. You could probably find that the security agents could be following Honorable Njeru here much more than they were doing to Pastor Mackenzie, because he's more of a threat, politically speaking, than Mackenzie was. You know, I was a young university student in the 90s when we attended the court sessions where you were being tried with Anyona and Professor Ngoto Kariuki.
Yes, yes.
And we could see how the state could muscle all its machinery because of just 3 simple men who were found drinking in a bar in an evening.
Okay.
So that's why I'm saying that if we had leadership that is concerned with the people, awareness rising would be their program. If we had a leadership that was concerned with the people, efforts that will lead to the eradication of disease will be their program. If we had a leadership that thought about the people, you know, ignorance, we are talking about declining educational standards in this country, will be at the forefront. That's why countries that have had leaders with a vision, they have witnessed transformation. And still we are here.
There is a question that he is asking. How do we make it our story? I think very fundamental question.
Yeah.
And it is this, that from 1997, our current president has been in parliament, you know? And if my brother Ruto was thinking about transforming this nation to the things that he says in every forum that he attends, it would have been growing since 1997 and maturing now that he is getting into the State House to say, all the things I thought about must be done now, right? But what is it that he has done? He has continued to go around this nation. In fact, there is something I have seen that is very interesting, that my president is asking for 9 billion shillings for foreign travel only. 9 billion for 1 year, foreign travel. You can imagine how much that is. I think it is about 11 million per day. You know, 11 million shillings per day. It's a lot of money. And you see, if that is the thinking, then it means that he is denying 11 million shillings per day for anything that would have transformed this society. So the question is this: are the lieutenants around him capable? You know, and Gerald Ford tells you something interesting, that when he was asked, listen, you are not competent enough, according to us, to be president of the Republic of the United States. And he said, look behind me. That is the think tank. Okay. Anything that I want done in the United States will be coming from these minds. Do you doubt them?
Okay.
So now look. So Abdi, what I am saying is this, that if we expect anything to come out in this country to transform this society, like he's talking about my mentor, thinker, Mahatma Gandhi, then we expect an emerging leader to be coming up in this country, not the president.
Okay, Dr. Just hang on. Dr. Olo, then another, before we go to Katiba 2010, which Kenyans gave themselves and largely places the Kenyan people at the center of decision-making. That's why we have public participation and the account of Kenyans in any given aspect that touches on their lives. Earlier on, you made a point on how the British envisioned Kenya post-1963, a parliamentary system of a Westminster-style system of governance. But again, we had KANU Kadumaja, nibbled away Majimboism, and then you had the elite who you accused of the lacking visionary leadership post-1963, now giving us the system of governance that we had, which is the presidential system of government, until 2010 Katiba. Some had advocated for a parliamentary system again. The no's had carried the day. Still, we have the same, but we have the minority and the majority party in the National Assembly. Were the case as the British envisioned then, as per the Lancaster House Conference details, would the situation be different today?
Certainly, what we are saying is that, and I want to make this point, because it has been observed world over that good people, even with a bad constitution, will still make a good of it. But bad people with a good constitution will not make anything out of it. So that it is less of what we have and more of what we are. Because if we are, and by the way, what I'm saying is true, if we are a people who are we never arrive. We were looking for independence, we had the Lancaster Constitution, we never arrived. Once we got it, we started mutilating it and changing it and putting things there, including Section 2A. Now, we started another crop of fight to remove 2A. We thought that by the time we get to 2010 Constitution, we will have arrived. We have not arrived. The people who thought we wanted a parliamentary system were fought by the people who wanted a presidential system. So that you have a constitution that we adopted after the Naivasha MPs Forum, that is a mutilation. There are certain aspects of this constitution that don't work together. So you have the integrity chapter, leadership and integrity watered down. Then you have a mix of presidential here and parliamentary there, and so you don't have a purely presidential system. So you have something mixed up. Then you have this government come up, this new regime comes up and says, look, we want our cabinet secretaries into parliament. You hear people telling you that we want a leader of opposition, and you see that coming from, again, both sides, that the leader of opposition is okay. Now, this constitution as it is does not even lend itself to that kind of discourse. But it's there. So we have even not arrived as a country where we think we are. Yes, 2010 Constitution is very transformative. It puts the people at the center. Sovereignty is declared, it's the people. Indeed, a lot of things that it provides take away certain powers that were initially in the executive or in the presidency. That is a good thing. But have we reached a consensus? The answer is no. So when you look at this regime, the Kenya Kwanza regime, their problem is the constitution. When you listen to Jubilee regime, their problem was the constitution. They would say, oh, we want to do certain things, but you see, people are going to court. But for me, where I sit, this constitution is the biggest strength and perhaps the biggest safeguard that we've given ourselves so far. And this is where now I come in about the people. You know, when the people came in and went through a process of bombers and so on, up to the referendum, the people expressed their wish by adopting this constitution. It's as strong as it can be. But what are its leaders saying? They are negating it. They are looking for ways of amending it. They are unhappy with it. Even BBI, for example, was to me a very poor attempt at helping this constitution. It has, in fact, had nothing to do with strengthening the people's positions rather than creating positions of parliament and so on. So that my issue would be that we have not arrived as a country where we ideally want to be. We have a very transformative constitution, but it is not transforming us. We have values in there in Article 10, but those values, we are struggling with them. Every day we are going to court about, was there public participation? No. Today, as we sit here, the biggest weapon that anybody has against the finance bill is public participation, especially on housing.
Do we know what we want, or is it that our needs keep changing? We keep shifting goals?
That's what I'm saying. We have not arrived. We have not settled.
Or we don't know what we want, really.
But we have the avenue to reach that destination, which is
the new constitution, which we have.
Okay.
Yeah. You see, I like the direction that Dr. Lo is going, because it's boiling down to the fact that our problem is leadership, who is really tampering with the constitution that was applauded to be one of the most liberal constitutions that you have ever had. It's our leaders. You know, and somebody is telling me online that I'm giving and dwelling on examples from Asia and Europe of leaders who have transformed their countries. We have sterling examples in Africa, albeit short-lived. In Nigeria, for example, I think you referred to that. Nigeria has one of the most diligent people that I've ever met. Whether you visit Nigeria, you find them elsewhere in the world, is actually the most hardworking individuals that you can ever meet. Very shrewd in whatever they do, and very successful. But they have been led down by leadership. But one man, albeit he had a very short time. Mtala Mohamed came in and made a difference. Of all the countries, in where? In Nigeria. Tom Isidora Noel Sankara in Burkina Faso, 3 years, he transformed a country which probably the French had given up about. That's why I'm saying people are wonderful. People have aspirations. But the responsibility of transforming society and making it much better and serving the interests of us all lies with the leaders. And that is why leaders work very hard to keep us mukae hivyo hivyo na Mungu awabariki. Ignorant,
The status quo.
The status quo.
The less you know, the more they can control.
That's it.
Mheshimiwa, I wanted to weigh in on this, and let's talk about something also pivotal in our history. We cannot complete this sitting without talking about the coming of the multi-party democracy, which was one of the things that you fought so passionately for. If you look at what the vision was then in the 90s, vis-a-vis what we have today, do you get that sense of freedom, that sense of participatory democracy that we all anticipated to have? If you look at what is happening right now in our political space, would you say finally we got it? We have a reason to celebrate in this regard?
The movement for change in this country started around 1965. And it has gone non-stop since. And the reason why it started since that time is because Kenyatta had kind of reversed the thinking of the freedom fighter and the liberation strugglers, including that of the thinking of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, who was actually almost a lone man fighting for him in parliament to be released, and even refused to take leadership or to form government in 1961 before Jomo Kenyatta was released. And Kenyatta came, yes, they released him, for him to come and join the forces so that they can reconstruct this nation. And what did he do? The man came to take land, the same land that people were fighting for, the same land that was the dream for nations or for the people. He came grabbing kila kitu after appointing the Ramea to be the first chair of the land committee in Kenya in 1964. And the Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and Bildad Kagia said, no, that is not why we were fighting. We must stop you. And since then, they became enemies. And later on, Jaramogi walked out and he jailed, the Kagia, to humiliate him. And he was a compatriot. He was his comrade, blood brother, in the struggle. And so, since then, he started changing the constitutions and the laws to make sure that Jaramogi does not get space. And so, some of us are students of that Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. May God keep him well wherever he is, And he was telling us this every time we went to him. And some of us are still loyal to those thoughts. You cannot be able to lead society until you are able to understand the aspirations of that society. You cannot be able to address those aspirations until you look at the persons involved in your country to understand what their plights are. They may have dreams, but even at personal level, they have got their own limitations. What is it you do about it? So every time we went to those movements, we were thinking about the aspirations of the people, that is the national aspiration, and the plight of every individual and community, And when it came to Jomo Kenyatta, and that is why we started quarreling him, he jailed us in 1975, 1976, 1977. He put us in, the man, And also, of course, God knows how he is keeping them. But of course, I would like Jaramogi to be in a better place. What I'm trying to say is this, is that even as we struggled, we were struggling to make sure that the aspirations of the people are achieved. 1, 2, to change the status of the individual and the community. Because some of them had been totally ignored, excluded completely, not in social life, not in politics, not in the economies, particularly the neighboring communities or rather than border communities. Most of them were ignored completely. Listen, and we say, no, we are one nation. We have got to make sure that we are all included. For example, the Northern Frontier District, which they called NFD then, from Kitale, that way was not Kenya. From Kitui, that way was not Kenya. Isiolo, that way was not Kenya. And the question is, who are they? Right? So if we are going to be fighting the Luos, we are going to be fighting and so forth and so forth and so forth. So what kind of country are we going to be having? That was the struggle. And because of what Kenyatta did to our constitutions, then our groups started emerging and saying we must change. And by the time the man is falling in 1978, some of us were still in prison. We came to find out that the man died. And we asked ourselves, who has come? And we were told, Moi. And with him was Jonjo, again, God rest him. We had Kariuki Gigi, God rest him, and others surrounding the man. And all they were saying is this, that Moi is just like a passing crowd. The leadership was theirs. That is Jonjo, Gigi, whatever. Yeah. And we were saying, no, we cannot be led by the same groups forever.
Where do you want their spirits to be? Where do you want their spirits to be?
No, that's not a very appropriate question. No, you cannot ask that question.
Yeah, in fact, I can answer it. Yeah. I can answer it. Those that are not repentant will be in purgatory.
Okay. you will.
Yes. But
as you finish up,
yes.
you will respond to that off the mic.
Yeah. But the issue is this. That therefore, by the time that the Moi was coming in, the battle lines had already been drawn about what it is that should be addressed in this country and who they were to us, right? And we were convinced that Moi represented the dynasty created by Jomo Kenyatta.
Thank you.
And so he had to be fought.
Yes, Dr.
Up to the time that
Okay, before we sample.
Mheshimiwa Njeru has referred to something that I want to put my views into. The marginalization of some part of this country, particularly the Northeast, Moss Island, and many others. This is really a direct product of the policy positions that our leaders have taken before. And Dr. Olo referred to the session of paper number 10. In a sense, that was actually the curse of the country. Because
it placed emphasis on
because it continued the colonial mentality of classifying the country into high and low potential areas based on Kenya's agro economy. And literally now from a development policy point of view, that kept these lands, the North Frontier District in the colonial period, the northeast of Kenya now, to be what it is. That's why my prayer has always been that for the sake of the Northeast, for example, the Northeast, for example, why can't we find oil there? Because that will transform. It's Professor Ali Mazrui who used to say that where you have Muslims and you have a desert, there is a likelihood that you can have oil.
There is.
I pray that becomes the case, because that is actually what is going to transform that area, and all of us will now move there and say, oh, it is now high potential.
Thank you.
There is. But just to
briefly, because you need to sample the feedback.
Yeah, but just confirm this, that when we are talking about foreign aggression, we are also talking about those countries that have come here depositing waste materials of nuclear waste materials.
Uranium waste.
And some of the areas that we are talking about is where they have been deposited, meaning that you have a lot of cancer preference in those areas. However, oil. I was in the armed forces also, Brother Daktari, and until about 1975, 76.
Oh, wow.
Right? And one of the things that we know is that the British were very, very, very keen keen to have oil everywhere. And northeastern province had about 2-3 wells that they had confirmed kuna mafuta. But because they feared the aggression again from Somalia during the Shifta war, they said close them first. And therefore, it is the current leadership, like you are saying, that is supposed to open up those plugs.
Okay. Talking about that, the nationalization of the oil in Iran, which led to the overthrow of the regime then, that was as a result of the sponsorship by the CIA and the British intelligence agency, the MI6, which is partly because of the nationalization of the oil in Iran. And installing a regime that was the years so far meant to London and Washington, leading to the revolution in 1979 until now, where we have the Khomeinis in authority, and what perhaps led to the bad blood between the West and partly the former Persian Empire. The feedback here on the broadcast, the hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya, at Ayub Abdulkadir, and at Safin_Cheng. Here's what Brian Chemwa is saying. The transition should reshape governance system, promote peace and drive economic development, and address social injustices. Transition should be well-planned, inclusive, and ensure long-term success without pitfalls that can hinder progress. Poor leadership is a key problem.
We have Honorable Lilian Sioi. It took bloodshed to liberate Kenya from the yoke of our colonial masters. As we celebrate Kenya at 60, we are reminded to jealously guard the peace that we enjoy as Kenyans, especially as we gear up Finance Bill 2023.
Bob Otieno Owino says poor leadership in the name of greedy, corruption and ethnicity killed the spirit of our forefathers who fought for our independence to have better equality life among Kenyans.
We have Remy Butia. We have in our history a reminder of what our country was back then. We are also aware of the current state, and we can use this history to shape Kenya's future state. We always dream of the Kenya we want.
This is from Okelo Mwalimu. The major difference, he says, between the current crop of leaders and our independence time heroes are heroines is that whereas the latter group consisted of patriotic and honest leaders, the former is a conglomeration of plainly dishonest and opportunistic dealers, save for a few.
We have Kiswi Philip, we have the problem in Kenya has always been the elite who have always thought that they are superior and greater than the nation. That's why key government policies and agenda are mere with interest of certain political elite and characters in mind, and not the nation.
And this one from Musoma, he says our time to eat mentality is the cancer eating Kenya. It incubates negative ethnicity, fuels political propaganda and stereotypes like the tyranny of numbers to sustain the narrative. That's why communities that have produced presidents dominate the public service. And that's what you're saying on the Twitter hashtag, Daybreak at Citizen TV Kenya, at Ayub Abdikadir, and at Safin_Cheng. We thank our panel this morning here, Jeru Kadhangu, former Runyanjes Member of Parliament. He was very passionate about this topic, and he said the Madaraka Day will be held in his home county of Embu tomorrow on Thursday, where President William Ruto will be presiding over that event. Dr. Martin Olo, thank you for your time and company here on the broadcast, commentator on social, political and governance affairs in the country, and as well, Dr. Check out the name again?
Kenneth Ombogi.
Who leads the Department of History at the University of Nairobi. Your time is all appreciated, and many thanks for your input here on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your day as we anticipate tomorrow the Madaraka Day celebration. Thank you. Keep watching Daybreak.